late edition, and I'm sure there's plenty that are going to be announced this week, as we have All In Brendan Allen taking on Tarzan, Sean Strickland. Cue up the Baltimore. But hey, for Sean Strickland on the right-hand side, he had a really big fight against Jack Marshman just a couple of weeks ago, put on a statement win, and he'd been away for a couple of years training out of Syndicate. He's been a long-time Kings MMA guy as well. But again, the reason why he was off for so long, had a terrible motorcycle accident. He's a thrill seeker, he's a thrill junkie, he's still riding motorcycles because he's a wild man. But in that performance, moving back up to middleweight, you recognize him in the UFC as a welterweight, but moving back up to middleweight, where he's a former champ with King of the Cage, he looked great. He looked bodied up. I mean, that picture over there on the right-hand side, that's a new picture of Sean Strickland, but you heard us in our video saying that he looked like a brick house, and he did. And he put on a great performance. Now, it was a great performance short of a finish, but when you're pointing at Jack Marshman, getting him to bring the fight to you, and not cussing him out, but playing those games, playing the hand games like Max Holloway against Brian Ortega, it was a really good comeback performance from Sean Strickland. Now, for Brendan Allen on the left-hand side, Matt, we were really excited for his fight against Ian Heinisch. You went as far as saying that was your fight of the night. Easily. For last weekend, unfortunately, that fight fell out. For Brendan Allen, he's really excited about this fight. He posted about it on Instagram this afternoon. For Sean Strickland, I'm sure that feeling is mutual. Now, Matt, this card overall, maybe not the most stacked in terms of name value. Definitely the fact that you lost Khabib's protege in Islam Makhachev in the main event. RDA scrambling for an opponent. He says maybe he'll take a fight at 170 pounds. But, I mean, you look at the guy, he's bodied up, and he's already on his way to make the cut for 55. So it's probably not going to happen. If you were to give this card a letter grade, I'm probably not going to give it the best one that I've given a card in a long time. It's not one of the better cards. But this is one of those fights that you get up for, you get excited about, and I'm already looking forward to it. And, hey, both of these guys, different skill sets. For Brendan Allen, 24 years old, the level of competition he's faced and the amount of fights that he's had, you're not going to see a lot of 24-year-olds with that type of resume. For Sean Strickland, already 21-3, and I mean, since he's been in the UFC, he's 8-3 so far. That level of competition as well. The losses, Santiago Ponzinibbio, Kamaru Usman, and Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos. Pretty good company.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And this fight is probably going to be the new fight of the night on the card. Sean Strickland and Brendan Allen, they're equally effective, but in very different ways. Sean Strickland, he was known sort of as that Neil Magny type body type at 170, sort of a tall, thin guy, had really good striking at range. And those 2 years off, yes, it was to recover from the motorcycle accident, but the thing that I like about Sean Strickland moving up to 185, it's not like when Max Holloway moved up to 155 to fight Dustin. It was like, okay, it's a featherweight, he hasn't really grown into 155. Sean Strickland took those 2 years to really build his frame into a 185er, and you could tell 100% in the Jack Marshman fight, because Jack Marshman, he's a thick 185er, and Sean Strickland matched up really well physically with him. Now, outstriking Jack Marshman on the outside, which is Sean Strickland's kind of bread and butter and his game plan, is one thing. Brendan Allen's going to come with a completely different skill set and game plan from a guy like Jack Marshman. Brendan Allen, if he gets you on the ground for any period of time, and I really do mean like 30 seconds to a minute, the combination of ground and pound and submission threat is just phenomenal, because a lot of guys, they're either one or the other. There are people like Khabib, of course, who when they get on top of you, they're just going to beat you up until they get the submission. Brendan Allen could go for either. He gets into a really dominant position, has really heavy top pressure, kind of like Glover Teixeira, just to bring up a familiar name from recent. And if he does get on top of Sean Strickland, he is going to really, really damage him, to the point where Sean Strickland, who I do think has the cardio edge over Brendan Allen, might start to wear down as this fight goes on. Because Brendan Allen, we saw it in the Kyle Dawkins fight, his striking actually looked really good in that fight. It looked better than it had in previous ones. But he did start to tire as that fight progressed. Now, you can say, well, he had his opponent hurt. He really exerted a lot of energy going for the finish. And you would be right there, but it is something to watch out against a guy in Strickland who he can really kind of weaponize his pace. And if he is able to defend a lot of those takedowns and force Brendan Allen to work on the outside with him, Sean Strickland's combinations are really going to start piecing Brendan Allen up.
We talk about a lot of guys, and I mean, Matt, I'm sure there's some names that you can think of off the top of your head that stay on their bike, and they're very consistent when they fight. And if you look at Sean Strickland's run in the UFC, we'll talk about some of the names, because, again, he has the bigger body of work. 11 total fights. He beats Bubba McDaniel in his debut, submits him. Beats Luke Barnett by split decision, big slow. Then he loses to Ponzinibbio by decision. Then he beats Igor Araujo by decision. He finishes Alex Garcia. I think that's a really big win. You know Cuba. You know the wrestlers. You know Alex Garcia. He beats Tom Breeze by split decision. Loses to Usman by decision. Beats Court McGee by decision. Gets knocked out by Eliseu in a highlight reel loss. knocks out Nordin Taleb, and then he has that fight against Marshman. The thing to me, you can see that consistency is there for Sean Strickland. You saw that in the fight against Marshman. It was just a steady output until the end when he really wanted to throw down and show what he could do, especially near the end of that fight. I mean, he beat Jack Marshman up in that one. And you look at it, I mean, in terms of the
I mean, he joins a long line of people, though, who have done that in the UFC. No disrespect to Jack Marshman, but striking on the outside against him is very different than doing that against another guy who I would consider in the somewhat elite of the middleweight division.
And the thing with Sean Strickland, too, out of that fight, 83% of his total strikes were to the head. All of his strikes were considered significant strikes. And again, 46% to Marshman's 19%. It was just a masterclass of a performance coming back. That's what you want to highlight. For me, too, the other things that I really like about Sean Strickland are his strikes absorbed to strikes absorbed to landed ratio. He's landing much more than he absorbs at very decent percentages. The striking defense is great at 67%. He might not be the most accurate guy, but he's always going to throw that volume at you. And especially in this fight, what I want to highlight is the fact that his takedown defense at 81%. He has faced good wrestlers. Kamaru Usman's one of them. And again, Alex Garcia is another one. You look at the fight against Usman, he did get taken down a number of times. He got taken down twice. And in the Alex Garcia fight, he got taken down 3 times, but he ended up submitting Garcia. I really do like that. Combined with that steady pace on the feet, you know it's there. For Brendan Allen, though, Matt, and this was something that we talked about before we started the video, he's faced a really good level of competition all the way up through. It's not like he was just fed absolute scrubs. And so far in the UFC, he's faced a healthy dose of differing skill sets. I mean, you look at it, the Aaron Jeffrey win of Contender Series, I think was huge because we've seen Aaron Jeffrey learning from that loss and continuing to win. Then he fights Holland, then Breeze, then Dawkins. I don't think he got 100% Tom Breeze like we saw Breeze in the fight against KB Bowler. But the Dawkins, Breeze, and Holland wins are huge for if you're a big Brendan Allen supporter.
They really are. And the Kevin Holland win, too, because Kevin Holland does strike in a similar manner to Sean Strickland. I would argue Kevin Holland has a lot more power than Sean Strickland, because Kevin Holland's got that weird whip on the end of his shots where he's tall and thin, but for some reason, he can drop people. And to go out there and submit a guy like Kevin Holland, who we've seen in the UFC, he's a pretty good black belt himself. Sean Strickland, yes, he submitted Alex Garcia. If you think Sean Strickland's going to submit Brendan Allen, you've got another thing coming, as I forget what band sang that because I'm a young person, but I think Brendan Allen, if he is able to get top position, worst case scenario, he is just going to win the rounds. I know Sean Strickland's fought good wrestlers in the past. There's a good wrestlers at 170, though, and a really top-level wrestler at 185. If he is able to get that top pressure and that top control, I just don't see Sean Strickland being able to scramble out from underneath him, and I do think that the ground and pound and just the overall physicality of Brendan Allen's game will start to wear on Sean Strickland to the point where his cardio advantage will play so much of a factor later on down the stretch.
I mean, Rob Halford and the fans of Judas Priest are definitely going to be very upset at you, but they're also going to be upset at you for another reason. I mean, Sean Strickland, a lot of his career has taken place in middleweight. Again, I referenced it, but former King of the Cage middleweight champ. He has a lot of experience on the regional scene at middleweight, and I think the move up has paid just immediate dividends. You saw it in the last fight, but again, cardio's never really been an issue, and I think adding that extra weight's only going to help him. It's not like his hand speed went off a cliff moving up. I think it's only helped. I really like Sean Strickland in this fight. Again, we don't have Tapology votes. We don't have odds to go off of. If I had to guess on this one, Brendan Allen, Ian Heinisch were par odds at the time that the fight was taken off. I think a fight like this is going to be pretty close. Who would you edge, or who do you anticipate will be the favorite in this one?
And not just because I am predicting Brendan Allen to win, but just the fact that he was supposed to fight a ranked guy, and not that Sean Strickland's a big drop-off from Ian Heinisch in any aspect. And I gotta be honest, I'm picking Brendan Allen, but this fight could go completely either way. Like, Sean Strickland's a very dangerous guy to be fighting, but I see him as, skill-wise, he's not really any lesser than Ian Heinisch. Like, they just have different skill sets, but they do a lot of the same stuff. It's just the fact that he doesn't have that number next to his name. Odds makers might give Brendan Allen a slight edge. He might be like a minus 150 to 170, but it should be pretty close odds-wise. These guys are going to put on a great show.
I think it's going to be a great show, too. And a little bit of behind the curtain inside baseball, as I love to say. But I look at this, and Matt, you kind of talked a little bit more about Brendan Allen. I talked a little bit more about Sean Strickland. But overall, this fight's amazing. It's tough to pick either one of these guys. And I mean, if I can focus on Brendan Allen just a little bit, Matt, I look at his overall body of work. And again, you only have the stats from those 4 fights, and they're going to be a little biased, but I do like the fact that Brendan Allen has that fight against Kevin Holland, that of course is a win, and you see what kind of a run Kevin Holland's on. I mean, imagine if Brendan Allen was just a little bit more active and followed the Kevin Holland route.
Exactly.
Holland's getting number 4 ranked Jack Hermanson in a main event slot.
Like, Brendan Allen could beat Joaquin Buckley on a week's notice. I'm sorry, but he could. So he could probably be in the same position. No,
so, I mean, Brendan Allen, you look at those wins. I don't think Tom Breeze was 100%. So there is that. I discount that one a little bit.
Is good,
the Kevin Holland fight, Allen, what I like in that fight is that he showed resolve. You could take it as, well, he got knocked down and he was cracked and he was bloodied, and maybe that fight, if it ended, like if the second round went on, maybe the doctor would have ended it. I don't know. You never know. We talking ifs and ands or buts. But Brendan Allen submitted him in that fight. That was amazing. We know how good Kevin Holland's jiu-jitsu is pretty good. I mean, look, he's coming out of Travis Luter's camp. He's been there for a very long time, enough to get that black belt. So for Allen to have that win on his record, I love it. He's faced fighters like Sean Strickland before. He's beaten fighters like Sean Strickland before. So I wouldn't discount or take anything away from somebody that would say that Brendan Allen might not win this fight. That Sean Strickland might not win this fight. I like Strickland in this fight because Kevin Holland rocked Brendan Allen, and I love the fact that Sean Strickland has that body of work against wrestlers where, all right, you've lost to Ponzinibbio, you lost to Usman, you're on Elizeu's highlight reel. Everybody's lost to Kamaru Usman.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's lost to Kamaru Usman. Sean Strickland has picked up the pieces, and I really like how he came out in his last fight and put on that statement. I like Sean Strickland in this fight because, again, the takedown defense is there. The forward pressure is there. The striking's there, and the cardio's there. Where for Brendan Allen in that fight against Kyle Daukaus, look, I think Kyle Daukaus has a very high ceiling in this sport. I think he wasn't just some guy that they picked up from CFFC and went, hey, you had a good performance. Let's just grab your brother, too. Because, I mean, hey, if ESPN called us tomorrow, they're probably going to take one of us. They'll take one, and hopefully the other one petitions for the other. But, I mean, hey, it's a cutthroat business. I probably won't. No, I'm kidding. But I look at this one, and the Daukaus brothers are great. But for Kyle in the fight against Brendan Allen, he really brought it to Allen. And when we started to get into the second round and the third round, that's when it started to kind of all go a little bit more in Daukaus' realm. I like Strickland in this fight for that reason. You're going to get a steady, consistent guy with good takedown defense. You get a guy that can throw the volume with a little bit of power on his shots. I like Strickland. You've got Allen.
I hate myself for what I'm about to do. Brendan Allen's a lock of the week. I'm bringing it back. Romanov was last week. Brendan Allen has this in the bag. The physicality of his game is going to be too much for Sean Strickland. It's one thing to look good against Jack Marshman at middleweight. It's another thing to look good against Brendan Allen, who's been preparing against a guy who was training in Thailand and Ian Heinisch. So he's going to be more than prepared for that Muay Thai style and the boxing of Sean Strickland. I am so confident in the Brendan Allen pick. It is not even
trained in Muay Thai for one fight, had to leave the camp because of COVID. Yep. And then in the
Brendan Allen would be expecting the same style out of Ian Heinisch, and he's going to be getting out of Sean Strickland.
Sean Strickland had 2 years off because of a horrific motorcycle accident, and they gave him a tune-up fight. So I'm fine with tune-up Strickland. I think he looks great. Matt, you're going with Brendan Allen. You're calling it a lock of the night, even though you said it was a really close fight. So take that for what it's worth. I think that this card, we're going to get some more late notice additions that, hey, I mean, this possible fight of the night. So if we can get 2 or 3 more of these types of fights, we're all over it. And as they progress and as they are announced, make sure you keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. Every now and again, we have a little bit of animosity between the picks, but I'm really looking forward to this weekend. We've got question mark kicks on Saturday. That's our live show. Maybe one of these two guys has a bad weight cut. Maybe something happens during the week. Maybe some fights fall out. You got to check out that show where we lock in our final picks of the week. It happens an hour before the prelims start. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.